All right, so if we go back to this script up here, we can see what else did I do here. Some garbage mats, so we can take a look at doing that. We can see I've already built the key differently than I've done down here. So you see I've done slightly different ways of creating things than I did here. And this is the first time I did it. So like I'm not even, I don't have an exact process every time, but it's kind of the same. So pretty much the same structure and everything. And 90% of the time I'm working this way. So yeah. And just taking a look through if there's anything else that I don't want to miss explaining in the process I did here. So we're going to do those two things here. So we're going to go down here, back to where we were. I'm going to do a garbage mat. So I'm going to hit O on the keyboard, create a row shape, and a merge node with M, and set it to stencil. And I'll take the rotor shape and just go in here and just chop away some of this light fixture that's up here, and maybe some of this weird grain that's also there. So we can chop that off, make sure this is set to no clip, and we'll just blur this a little bit. And we'll just kind of go in there. And our camera is moving, so we got to be careful. Meaning, if we want to do the full moving composite of this shot, it would be good to probably track this rotor shape on the background. So we can actually do that real quick. That wouldn't take too long. So we can go find something that we could 2D track. We have this like perfect weird reflection that might actually work. So we can do a 2D tracker. If you've taken Nuke 101, you know how to do this. And hopefully you have, because that's an earlier class in this series. So I hit the tracker, and we can go here and select that point. It's a little bit out of focus, but should work. And I'm on frame 56, so we'll set that as a reference frame. And then I'm going to track forward. And I'll stop it there. I'll just do up to 100 frames. I won't do the entire image sequence. And I'll track backwards. And so we got this nice 2D track. 56 is the frame I did the roto on. So I'll set my reference frame to frame 56. And I'll say I want to export a transform match move. So if you hit this button and hit transform match move and hit create, make sure you select the one that says baked. Transform match move baked. Just gives you a different one that's not connected to this tracker. So in case you ever delete this, you don't lose. If this is deleted on accident, you still have this like transformation, which is your track. And I'll go there and I'll just chuck that on our rotor shape. So now our rotor shape will move across time with this frame. So if I scrub, we can see that if I have my viewer here, you'll see that it actually sticks along with the rest of the background. So that's a quick and easy way to do that. One thing I'm also noticing is we see this bounding box is getting quite large, this dotted line, and that's why if I am switching frames, it's taking a while to load, because it's actually loading pixels that are outside here. So what we can actually do is on these key mix nodes, or let's say it's actually coming from this node. It's because I used a rotor shape that's really big out of frame, and I haven't set the no clip, so it's creating this really large bounding box, which means all the pixels are getting processed out here. So to speed our script up, what you can actually do is go to the merge node and set the bounding box to B. So basically, it will keep the bounding box from the previous input on B. So if you look at B, there's no overscan, there's no dotted line outside of here. So when you're selecting the bounding box and setting it to B, you're keeping it the same as this. So this new thing that's being merged over, we're not going to keep all the information from this layer of A. We're just going to crop it at the bounding box of B. And okay, so we'll continue on. And again, you can see this node is also doing the same. We're getting a large bounding box, so we'll set the bounding box to B to make sure our script stays nice and fast. And that's good for now. So what else can we do? Let's try to get rid of some of that gray stuff automatically. So I'm going to go here, place a grade. And I'll go to RGBA and just tweak the black point down a little bit. Obviously, you see we're losing all our hair detail and all kinds of stuff. We don't want to do that. So first thing, I'm going to go back up and I'm going to place this correction up where it's being caused. So on this key is where it's being caused. So I'm going to go up to here, put a grade node, and I don't want to apply it everywhere. I kind of want to apply it more towards the center. So I'm going to isolate that effect and make sure we protect. We actually kind of want a gray edge to maintain some of the hair. Because if we apply this, we start to lose all our hair detail. So we're actually going to leave a little bit of gray around the edges on purpose. So I'm going to make sure that we do that. So one way you can do that is kind of get a grade off to the right here. Set a white clamp and black clamp so we don't mess up any values as we color correct this. Because we don't want anything over 1. You basically never want an alpha over 1. There's not that many reasons to ever do that. So usually I just turn that on when I'm working with alphas. And I'll get a really harsh key by just adjusting the black and white point. And essentially what I'm going to do is do an erode filter and erode it out a little bit. And then switch and duplicate it and then switch it to Gaussian. Just doing this kind of blurry thing, and maybe even a blur on the end of it, just to get like a really kind of blurred alpha. And I'm going to plug this color correction into that, which means it's doing it just on the edge, and then we'll just invert that. So now the color correction is being applied only to the center, and we're keeping some gray around the edge a little bit so we can kind of keep some detail. And then I can sort of fade and adjust the blur size. So I'm going to adjust the size of these. I'm basically just clicking these erodes and playing with the size afterwards and looking at this visually to understand. So maybe I'll just sort of shrink that in a little bit. And make sure, and we'll just turn that on and off to make sure we're not losing too much detail. And you can see, I think it's doing a pretty good job. So we're keeping detail around. We have a little bit of gray just to make sure we keep our edges. And then we're keep mixing some hair back on afterwards anyways, so it doesn't really matter what's happening there. So we're using a different key on key 2. I'll label that as well. So it's key 2 hair, so you guys know what it is. And I'll call this cleanup alpha. Cleanup alpha. So to summarize, we took a key, we made it a harsh key by doing a white and black point adjustment. We eroded it outwards and blurred it, and then we inverted it and applied that correction, the darkening correction to get rid of all this gray, just to that area. And yeah, so that's a quick and dirty way of, I mean, I wouldn't say a dirty way. Actually, it's a good way of quickly doing a key. And, you know, if in the final composite some of these gray areas show up, you might need to tighten these rotos a little bit. If we can't, for whatever reason, get rid of that grain, we might need to do, you know, chop a roto here to keep that, or do some color corrections, etc. So maybe just to blend it out if we don't want to see these harsh edges in the final composite where I blended these two keys. So maybe if we put a blur there, it's not going to be noticeable. So I'm putting a blur on that rotor shape that blends key 1 and key 2 together. And this will work for our first layer, first build of our alpha. If we have problems, we can go back and adjust. So now I'm gonna basically, that's good enough for the key. We'll copy this, so put a copy node and plug it in. And so if this is like a feature film key, sometimes you gotta capture every tiny bit of detail. Sometimes if it's a TV or episodic, basically, you know, you're still limited by budget. So it depends how much time you have to work through. So this is done pretty quickly, but still has a decent amount of detail in there. So yeah, now we can move on to despelling. So if we pre-multiply this, we can see no despel is there, and you know, that's not going to work for a background. So I'm going to bring in our background as well, because we're starting to, once we start to get the despel, it's important to have a background to work with. So I'm going to copy this picture down here so you guys can grab it. So I'll put these at the top. So when you guys start, you can start with these two nodes here. So I'll put a foreground. Background. Oops. Background. And I'll copy our background down here and put it up here. So usually when I'm compositing, I'll have my background at the top of the script, and I'll merge whatever things we're adding over from the left. So I'll grab this and plug it directly in. And if we had multiple layers going in this composite, we would do it here and merge it here. So left, merge it in. And we have this main B pipe going straight down. So yeah, that'll be a good starting point. Obviously, all kinds of issues. Despel is usually one of the biggest things, but we can also see the background's not graded to match the foreground. It doesn't really feel integrated. It feels like this doesn't even belong. We also have some weird stuff going on with the blacks of this image back there. And yeah, so if we compare that to my composite up here, we're going to learn how to get it from this point to this point. So we can see that there's a massive difference. Let me go to frame 56. I think this is where I did my rotoshapes. We can see there's a difference in terms of tones of the image and grain, and so we brought in a matching grain and stuff like that, and blended the colors a lot better. And we might even have slightly too much grain in my final comp. I think it's actually very close. This is a pretty grainy footage if you look at the actual footage. So we're actually kind of getting somewhat close. So we'll match that as well in terms of our integration at the end. But yeah, that's good enough for the key, and we'll start working on the despel now.